Somewhere in your house there is an old pocket knife your whole family has quietly agreed is worthless because it looks scratched and outdated and nobody can imagine using it again. But it might be worth more than your last car payment. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to walk you through 10 Swiss Army knives that hide inside ordinary homes dressed up as junk, waiting for someone to finally understand what they're holding. Number 10 on this list is the commemorative event knife from a discontinued production run. A specific date, a specific city, a specific occasion stamped onto the scale, tied to something that only happened once. Picture a woman standing behind a folding table at her mother's estate sale, sorting through a shoebox of loose keys, expired coupons, and a handful of pocket knives nobody in the family ever used. One of them has a faded emblem on the scale, some kind of anniversary logo, a year she doesn't recognize, half worn away. She sets it on the table with a $2 sticker next to a chipped coffee mug and a stack of paperback novels. A man in his 60s picks it up, turns it over twice, and buys it without saying much. He doesn't haggle. That alone should have told her something, but she's already moving on to the next box before he's back in his car. Knives from a confirmed one-off event run like this can realistically sell in the range of $80 to $250 to the right collector, sometimes more if the date ties to something historically significant. A knife tied to a single event, a World's Fair, an Olympic year, an anniversary celebration that only got marked once, is a different animal from a generic tourist trinket, because once that specific print run sells through, nobody's making more of that exact design. The licensing for the event artwork typically expires, and the knife becomes a small, unrepeatable snapshot of a date that will never come around again. Faded printing, a dulled emblem you can barely make out, a body slightly heavier than the current year souvenir version because older production tolerances on these commemorative runs tended to run thicker on the liners. The engraving is what pulls your eye. It's also exactly what distracts you from checking the tang stamp underneath, which is where any real evidence of the production window actually lives. Comment below if you have any old Swiss Army knives tucked away in a drawer, toolbox, or tackle box. I'd be happy to take a look and let you know whether it may be worth something. Now, number 9 strips away the guesswork entirely, because this one isn't about a single event at all. At number 9, we've got the scratched-up tinker with an odd tang stamp. It's one of the most common Swiss Army knife patterns ever produced, sitting in coffee cans and junk drawers by the millions, priced at $2 or $3 because everyone assumes common means worthless. Usually they're right. Most tinkers sell for exactly what they look like, $5 or $10 at best. But the specific early stamp variation collector's chase can push that same knife into the $50 to $150 range, sometimes higher depending on condition, because it's the stamp doing the talking, not the pattern. Think about how many of these get handed down without ceremony. A father gives his son a tinker for his 16th birthday because that's what his own father gave him. 20 years later, that son finds the same knife in a coffee can full of loose screws and dead batteries and almost tosses it in with the scrap metal headed for the recycling bin. It's just a knife that's always been there, the way certain objects become furniture in a house rather than possessions anyone actually thinks about. He can still picture his father's hands opening it that day, showing him how the scissors worked, but somehow that memory never once made him flip the blade over and actually look at what was stamped underneath. Certain earlier production runs carry a tang stamp variation, a slightly off-center cross shield, a country of origin mark used for a limited window before the manufacturer standardized its stamping process. And some collectors specifically look for that detail. Worn red scales, gone the color of dried brick, stiff opening action from decades of hardened pocket lint in the pivot. A stiff blade feels broken to most people. It usually isn't. Number 8 brings something different into play. The small keychain-sized classic missing one of its tools. No scissors, no toothpick. And that's usually enough for someone to write the whole thing off. A college student once found one of these on a lanyard tangled up with a rusted whistle and an old locker key in her grandmother's junk drawer. She almost threw it into a donation bag headed straight for a thrift store bin. What stopped her was the click when she opened the blade. Sharp, solid, nothing loose or wobbly about it. She stood there in the hallway for a full minute, just opening and closing it, half expecting the spring to finally give out the way everything else in that drawer seemed ready to. It never did. Even missing a piece, an early production classic with the right stamp can land in the $30 to $70 range, and a genuinely rare configuration has been known to clear well over $100. What tends to matter more is the spring tension and the blade steel underneath, not whatever small tool fell out of the handle years ago. A spring that still snaps the blade shut with real authority is a decent sign the internal mechanism never gave out. This is where the list stops being about old junk and starts being about a hidden checklist most casual sellers never learned: tang stamps. Scale material. Discontinued tool combinations. Once you know what to check, a $2 bin stops looking like garbage and starts looking like something worth a second glance, and possibly worth real money. Let's talk about a name a lot of people have simply never heard of. Number 7 is the Wenger Fish and Hunter combo with the unusual tool layout. And the reason it gets overlooked has less to do with condition and more to do with the brand itself. For most of the 20th century, Wenger and Victorinox were two separate Swiss companies that both supplied pocket knives under military contract. Far more people recognize one of those names today, so the other tends to get dismissed on sight and priced at whatever a generic pocket knife goes for, usually $5 or less. Imagine a fishing guide who spent 30 seasons on the same river, keeping his gear in a wooden tackle box because the wood never cracked. In the bottom tray, underneath spools of old line and a tin of rusted hooks, sits a red-handled knife nobody in his family recognizes the brand of. His grandkids assume it's some off-brand knockoff. They're not entirely wrong to be skeptical, but the brand they don't recognize built some of the more specialized outdoor tool sets of its era. When he finally hung up his waders for good, he handed that tackle box to his eldest grandson without a word, the way men like him tend to pass things down. No speech, no explanation, just a box and the assumption that whatever mattered would eventually make itself known. A confirmed, discontinued Wenger-Hunter combo in decent shape regularly brings $100 to $300 among collectors who track the discontinued tool set specifically, and rarer configurations have sold for considerably more. Certain outdoor-focused Wenger combinations, fish scalers, specific saw configurations, appear to have been discontinued when the two companies' catalogs merged in the mid-2000s and were never reissued under either name afterward. Darkened brass liner peeking through worn spots, wood-grain scales instead of plastic. Your modern multi-tools plastic fish scaler tends to snap off after a season or two. This one's been doing that same job for decades and, by most accounts, is still going. Now, flip that idea on its head, because number 6 is about a knife that looks like every other basic pocket knife on the table and isn't. This is the discontinued military contract model, usually priced around $5 in a box marked MISC Tools. Military contract runs are widely understood to have used tighter tolerances and specific steel grades compared to consumer lines. A confirmed contract-marked knife in honest, used condition can sell in the $150 to $400 range, and pieces tied to a documented unit or campaign have gone well beyond that among specialized collectors. A veteran once told a story about carrying a knife like this through 2 winters he'd rather not describe in detail, using it for everything from cutting rope to prying a stuck boot lace loose in freezing weather. When he came home, the knife went into a shoebox in his closet and stayed there for 40 years, forgotten, until his daughter found it while packing up his house. A small country or contract stamp near the base of the blade, a body heavier than expected, spring action that can still lock with real authority decades after issue. Your modern plastic multi-tool needs a charged battery just to run its light. This one's never needed anything but a pocket. If you're finding this useful and don't want to miss the next list, hit subscribe now. It's the only way to make sure you catch it before these names start showing up at your next estate sale. Item 5 shifts the conversation toward completeness instead of condition. This is the retired flagship multi-tool, packed with a dozen tools folded into one heavy body. Magnifying glass, wood saw, multiple screwdriver bits, sometimes even a small pair of pliers tucked into the spine. A retired engineer kept one of these in his desk drawer for 30 years, using every single tool on it at least once. Somewhere along the way, the magnifying glass lens popped out and got lost. He never thought twice about it. To a collector evaluating it today, that missing lens is the difference between a piece worth $200 complete and one worth maybe $40 as a parts knife. Most sellers see a complicated knife with a lot of tools and assume more tools automatically means more value, without checking whether every one belongs to the original release. A retired flagship with the correct saw, scissors, and unmodified screwdriver bit tends to be worth noticeably more than an incomplete one, often landing between $150 and $350 for a fully intact example, because completeness on a discontinued model can't be fixed with a trip to the store. Grease and grime hide the next one almost completely. Number 4 is the rare scale material edition sitting filthy in a mechanic's drawer or on an old barn workbench, and the dirt convinces most people it's been abused past the point of caring. A mechanic who ran his own shop for 4 decades kept a coffee can on his workbench full of loose bolts, cotter pins, and one knife nobody remembers him buying. It sat there through oil changes and brake jobs, black with buildup, indistinguishable from any other scrap metal in the can. When his son finally cleaned out the shop, he almost dumped the whole can into a bucket of scrap headed for the metal recycler. He wiped the knife on his jeans out of habit, and underneath the grime was a handle with visible wood grain running through it. Genuine stag or bone editions like this can realistically fetch $200 to $500 depending on the condition of the material underneath, since natural handle scales carry a collector premium synthetic material simply doesn't. Natural handle materials like bone and stag were more common on earlier production runs, before synthetics became cheap enough to replace them industry-wide. Underneath the buildup, visible pores and figure that synthetic material can't fake, a warmth that plastic doesn't have. Here's the twist worth knowing. Scrubbing it too aggressively, stripping that patina down, trying to make it look new, can actually work against the value you're trying to protect. By the way, if you're looking to resell some of your old knives and aren't sure where to start, check out my collector's guide linked below. There's a QR code on screen right now that'll take you straight to it. It walks you through tang stamps, scale materials, and what actually moves the price up before you list anything. Thanks. From here to number 1, the wrong judgment stops costing pocket change and starts costing real money. Number 3 is the pre-merger Wenger with a tool count that doesn't seem to exist anywhere anymore. You'll find it in a grandfather's tackle drawer, surrounded by loose split-shot sinkers and fishing line gone brittle, faded red scales gone almost pink from years of sun through a truck windshield. A family cleaning out that drawer after a funeral once nearly split the knife between 2 grandkids as a keepsake, planning to saw the handle in half. Somebody stopped them, mostly out of sentiment. It sat in a shoebox for another 2 years before anyone thought to look at what it actually was. A configuration collectors have paid $200 to $600 for, purely because it stopped existing the day the merger happened. Before Wenger and Victorinox combined operations, certain configurations, packed tool combinations, discontinued right around the time of the merger, meaning that specific setup was never manufactured again under either name. That gap in your garage isn't rust or wear. It's a configuration that stopped existing the day 2 companies became one, and scarcity like that is exactly what drives the price up, regardless of surface condition. 2 steps from the top sits the factory sample nobody ever documented. No flashy packaging, no certificate, nothing on the table that screams special. An antique dealer once described picking through a box lot at auction. Dozens of loose knives thrown together with mismatched cutlery, sold as a single lot for less than a diner breakfast. One knife in that pile had a tang stamp slightly different from everything else, tolerances a hair tighter than what he was used to seeing. He said afterward he almost didn't bid on the lot at all, and only did because the auctioneer bundled it with a box of fishing lures his nephew actually wanted. Once authenticated, factory samples and limited regional test runs like this can bring anywhere from $300 to well over $1,000, simply because so few of them were ever produced in the first place. Manufacturers occasionally run small test batches or limited regional releases that never got a full retail rollout, and if the numbers don't justify scaling up, the line quietly disappears into ordinary inventory, indistinguishable from anything else in the catalog. Most sellers glance past it, sitting between a mismatched fondue fork and a chipped mug. And that brings us to number 1. The early military issue, or contract configuration, everyone assumes is just an old knife. This is the one most likely sitting in your own inherited drawer right now, dismissed 100 times over because it looks plain, worn, and completely unremarkable. There's a particular kind of drawer almost every family has. The one with expired passports, old service medals nobody talks about much, and a knife that's been there so long nobody remembers if it belonged to a grandfather or a great-uncle. A woman going through that drawer after her father passed found a knife with a stamp she couldn't read without a magnifying glass, worn down to almost nothing by decades in a pocket. She nearly left it in the donation pile with his old flannel shirts. Some things men who served simply don't talk about, and the objects they carried end up saying more than they ever did. She still remembers him fidgeting with something in his coat pocket during holidays, never once explaining what it was, and it wasn't until she held the knife in her own hand 30 years later that she finally understood what he'd been quietly turning over all those years. A documented early contract issue piece like this, properly authenticated, has been known to sell anywhere from $400 to well over $1,000, and rare configurations tied to a specific short production window have gone significantly higher among serious collectors. Consumer knives were built to satisfy someone flipping it open in a store, checking that the action felt smooth. Contract knives were built to satisfy an inspector, checking whether it would still function after being dropped in mud, frozen solid, and thawed out repeatedly over a multi-year service life. That gap in expectations shows up in the steel, in the pivot tightness, in details nobody notices unless they're specifically looking. Small country marks, contract numbers worn down to a shadow. No shine. No flashy scales. Just a dull, honest tool that's outlasted plenty of plastic multi-tools while sitting quietly in a drawer, overlooked while its owner bought and tossed a few cheaper replacements along the way. No battery, no charger, no app, no plastic trigger waiting to snap. It just works, roughly the way it worked the day someone first carried it. The surface tells you it's worthless. The construction, and the price a real buyer would pay for it, tell you the opposite. So here's where that leaves you. These knives were never valuable just because they're old. They're valuable because the right version carries clues most people never learn to read. A stamp, a scale material, a tool combination that quietly stopped existing. The finish can lie to you. The price tag can lie to you. The seller can be wrong, and the donation pile can be wrong too. What matters most is the maker, the material, the manufacturing window, and whether that exact configuration still has demand behind it. And as you've seen, that demand can turn a $2 yard sale sticker into hundreds, sometimes thousands, of dollars in the right hands. They're also independent. They don't care if your phone battery is dead, if the store's closed, or if the app controlling your expensive gadget stopped getting updates 2 years ago. A knife like this turns your skill into capability instead of your convenience into dependence. That's probably why your grandfather carried the same beat-up knife for 40 years instead of upgrading every time something new hit the shelf. If you've got a few of these sitting in a drawer, a toolbox, or a tackle box somewhere in your house, you're already ahead of most people walking into a hardware store for another plastic gadget that'll be dead weight in 5 years. Before you donate that box, before you sell that knife for $2 at your next garage sale, check the stamp, check the scales, check the tool configuration. It takes 30 seconds, and it might save you from giving away real money for nothing. If this list opened your eyes, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment below if you've got one of these tucked away. I'll gladly take a look. Wait until you see what's hiding in your grandfather's old tool drawer that has